Hello, Puggies, and hello to Kim and Tonka. Hello, it's lovely to see you. Hopefully everyone can hear me. We've had a few difficulties over the last couple of weeks with the video and also the audio not coming through properly. So hopefully, well, I know that it's now the audio is working on my phone. So apologies for that. Double checking. Hello, Rachel and Agatha. It's so wonderful to see you. And thank you so much for saying hello and saying your name as well, because obviously sometimes the system between the streaming tool and also with Facebook, I don't always get to see your name. So it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much. I can see more people joining. It's wonderful. I really appreciate everyone who does come and join me on a Sunday night. You can't see it, but Charles is here with me tonight. He's currently having a bit of a snooze. Maybe you can see just the top of his head. He's having a snooze on my lap, and Rosie's currently standing up my feet. So she's decided that she doesn't want to sit on the beanbag. But also, if you hear a rustling in the background, you know that's Rosie having a bit of a grumble as she gets herself sorted. No, and I can now hear her. I can just see her rolling around behind me. Hello to Elvie, and I'm so sorry to hear about Minnie passing this week as well. So beautiful pug, and I'm so sorry that we couldn't be there at Playgroup to be with you. So with Melbourne and the lockdown and all the rules at the moment, you can probably now hear Rosie in the background jumping onto the beanbag and getting comfy. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. It's wonderful, and no one has said that they can't hear me, so I'm going to assume that the audio and the video are all good to go. Oh, hello Mazzy and Paula, hello. It's wonderful to see you tonight. So tonight's episode is about Winston, who you can see on the other half of the screen. He is one half of the dynamic duo that helped me first start Pug Parties. And tonight I wanted to share some stories with you about, thank you, Paula. Thank you for telling me you can hear me and see me. It means I finally got the software to work for me, as opposed to the blue screen that we seem to have at the start of all of our videos over the last couple of weeks. So please feel free to pop comments or anything throughout the live stream, ask questions. I'm more than happy to stop talking and answer those as we go. And at the end of the live stream, we'll be giving away a $20 Pug Parties gift card voucher to a lucky Grumble friend to say thank you very much for joining me tonight. Well, I shouldn't say just me, but also myself, Charles and Rosie. So as I mentioned, tonight is all about Winston, who is the one half of the Winston and Charles show. So he is Charles's litter brother, and we'll get into that in a moment. So we lost Winston at the start of last year rather suddenly, but he still lives with us in the 1,000,001 photos that we have of him, and the beautiful smile that he always had, as you can see in the photo that I'm sharing next to me. So Winston and Charles, for that matter, didn't come to Andrew and I until a few years after we lost Lewis, because Andrew and I were still serving in the Navy at the time, and we were both at sea, so we didn't think it was right having a pug at the same time as both of us being at sea and all those sort of things. So it wasn't until I retired from the Navy and relocated to Melbourne to start my new life as a civilian with Andrew that we finally got the chance to adopt another rescue. We had decided after Lewis that we were definitely going to go down that path. So we had a plan. Andrew still had 12 months in the Navy at that time, and so we'd originally agreed that we'd wait to get another fur baby until he was home permanently, so that this time round we could both be there for the introduction into the home and the settling in period. And as everyone knows, a new pug in the house, there's always turmoil as they get the hang of things, whether it's a puppy or a rescue. So this plan lasted about 3 months. So Andrew was home for a weekend. And he dropped the bombshell that, hey, how about we start looking now? And maybe we should get 2 pugs this time and not 1, which, as you can imagine, I was initially surprised because I'd only had Lewis the first time round. And then whilst I was doing an internal happy dance, I thought I'd better make sure that he understood that 2 pugs didn't mean like a slight increase in attention and effort. It was literally 2 times the effort of Lewis. And that was 2 times of everything in equal measure. So 2 times worth of attention and love, and it was 24/7. And, you know, all of those, twice the vet visits, all that sort of stuff. But he assured me that 2 was the magic number, which meant I did another little happy dance when he wasn't watching, because of course I was happy to have more than 1 pug. But he also believed that no doubt it'd take a few months to find 2 pugs that we could love. And so the timing of doing our search and you know, finding the perfect puggy connection and everything would actually time in really well with his transition out of the Navy into civilian life as well. So we were just like, yeah, we've got a plan. We're all good to go. So the next thing we did was we jumped on the Pug Rescue and Adoption website, thinking that we'd just start having a look and you know, there probably wouldn't be pugs available. So, you know, we were okay with that time frame. Because of course, you know, naively, everyone loves their pug and they never give them up. And, you know, like Lewis was just a rare, you know, that stuff doesn't happen all the time. And my God, how naive we still were after all that time. God help us. And so amazingly, same as what happened with Lewis, the universe stepped in and we jumped on Pug Rescue, and there was a listing for 2 2-year-old brothers. They were litter brothers. Their names were Sumo and JJ, and they needed to be adopted together because they'd been together forever. So, and the girls sort of decided that pretty much separating the 2 would actually be more detrimental than a benefit. And they were willing to wait to find the right home and the right people who were willing to take 2 at the same time with their unique health issues. So surprise, surprise, Andrew and I saw Winston and Charles and their little write-up and their picture, and we just knew that they were it. They were our boys. There was just something about their little puggy faces. And we applied to adopt them literally that weekend. And yes, so much for the plan of waiting until Andrew come home at the end of the year and all that sort of stuff. That completely went out the window, and that was like we kind of knew that regardless of the start to life, that we'd give them a home that they deserved, just like we'd done with Lewis, and that we were ready to make a duo part of our fur family, as opposed to sort of finding one and then getting them introduced and then finding a second and then introducing them into the home and doing that longer process. So, you know, heaven forbid one, you know, get your bang for your buck and get them both at the same time as we did. So I will talk about JJ, who you now know as Charles, next week, and which I'm sure you've put 2 and 2 together and realised that Winston was originally called Sumo. This was due to his weight when they rescued him, tipping the scales at 14 kilos at the age of 2. Like, I was amazed. Like, here I am thinking that Lewis, when I adopted him at 7 years old, and he was 10 kilos, and he was a stocky little 10-kilo pug. I think I was a little bit premature in my assessment of Lewis and calling him Fat Dog after having seen Winston and his early rescue photos before he went into Pug Rescue Boot Camp, and we all know how much hard work the ladies at all the rescues, not just Pug Rescue, but Pugs SOS and also Saffron, to make sure that all the puggies get back to a healthy weight. But can you imagine such a tiny little pug and so big? Like, he was one little round puggy, that's for sure. And when they were rescued, the weight wasn't the only thing. So they'd both been living in the courtyard of a townhouse. where they believed they'd lived there since they'd been separated from their mother. They had no shelter. They drank water from a dripping tap. There was no grass or garden to play on, let alone have something to explore or toilet on. And you'll understand why that sort of ended up impacting them when they come to us, and some of the things that we had to do we had to adjust when we figured out what was going on. So we assumed that they were at a minimum backyard bred. More than likely they're purebred by their look and their behaviours and personalities. But to be honest, Andrew and I just didn't care. Once we'd seen a picture of them and then they'd come over for their first home visit, we just knew that they were it. They were our boys. And luckily they didn't turn their noses up at us. So we ended up getting their 4 paws of approval. And before we knew it, literally from the time of first saying, hey, let's think about getting to them becoming a fur family, it was about 2 weeks. And as I said it before, and I'll say it again, some of the best times about being a pug parent, or the best things about being a pug parent, is that first couple of months when they've moved in, they've taken over your life, your heart, your couch, your toilet, everything. But you really get to know their personality and those unique idiosyncrasies that make them uniquely them. I was saying to one of the other pug parents last weekend after Lewis's live stream talk about the fact that Lewis was just always that zen kind of pug. He was just so calm all the time. You just had to look at him and you felt calm. Winston, his unique personality was he was just full of life, full on all the time. It was just amazing. Even though he was a little black pug like Lewis, completely different personalities. It was and it was really I got a lot of joy out of watching both Winston and Charles in that first couple of months figure out how they were going to be in their new home, which was very different from their old one. And so it was quite interesting for that first sort of 6 to 12 months whilst Andrew was still at sea. I got to do most of I was the single pug parent. And so I ended up, luckily I was at uni full time, and so I had the capacity to deal with all of the issues that they were sort of going through as they were getting used to living with us in our house compared to their previous home. There were a couple of mental issues. They had physical issues as well, which I will talk about. But even something as simple as they were 2 years old and they hadn't been toilet trained. So whilst they were with Pug Rescue, they'd started that process. And so I had to continue it on. And I have to admit, I was so lucky because Lewis had been toilet trained. It was one of the things his previous owners had done. Whereas Winston and Charles were still getting the hang of it. And by getting the hang of it, I mean, I'd wake up in the middle of the night in those first couple of months to the sound of one or both of them piddling in the bedroom right next to the side of my bed. It still makes me laugh now when I think about dreaming about waterfalls and then waking up and realising that it wasn't actually a waterfall. It was Winston or Charles. And it was quite interesting. So going through that, we ended up having to split their toilet training to day training and night training because we had doggy doors. So they just had to learn once they'd learned how to use them, we then had to go to the next step of getting them to go outside during the day and during the evening. And what we figured out was that day training, although it took a little while, once they got the hang of it, they were okay. Night training was a completely different thing. And then the only thing that we could sort of come up with was that they were afraid of the dark. So they'd gone from, it must be a black pug thing. My black pug Winston was full on in his personality, was like a standover man with his brother Dudley. Oh, thanks, Kim. That's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm saying, isn't it? It must be a Winston thing. So what Andrew and I think was the case when it come to with Winston and Charles is that they went from a backyard which was quite small, it was tiny, and it was because they didn't have a lot to go. They knew every inch of that very tiny plot quite well. So even when it was dark, they still knew where they were going. Whereas when they moved into our house, we had a back area, and then we had grass, and then beyond the grass we also had garden beds. And so we think it was just too much. There was too much for them to get the hang of. And, you know, there were lots of dark spots. So basically we thought, okay, how do we help these poor pugs get the hang of this new, their new forever home where they had all this freedom they just didn't know what to do with. So we ended up getting extra solar lights for all the garden beds, and then we gave them extra chockies for when they went outside at night without us, to go to the toilet. So it just got to the point where they realised that they were safe and that everything out there was all theirs to pretty much do with what they wanted. So the bonus was, after 6 months of concerted effort, I no longer dreamed of waterfalls or floods because they could go out to the toilet by themselves, thank God. So interestingly with Winston, other than being morbidly obese, he had cataracts on both eyes. I was just amazed. The girl said, like, he was going blind at the age of 2. And it was literally from neglect. The previous owners just not doing simple things like taking him to the vet and making sure that he was okay. So thankfully the girls at Pug Rescue caught it in time. And he had surgery, and then we obviously had the eye drops. And so for Andrew and I, we were really vigilant on his eyes after that, because we obviously didn't want him to develop them again. And the great thing is he kept his eyesight right up until the end. But the not so great part, although it is, it's not like it's an unusual thing, because he had lost a good portion of his eyesight so young in life, his sense of smell was so acute that he could, I swear to God, he could smell food from a kilometre away. And it was something that I'd never seen. Like, it was so acute. I grew up with hunting dogs. He could smell food that Charles couldn't pick up on. It was just amazing to watch. It also meant that whenever we took him for a walk, we had to watch him like a hawk, because the manky stuff that he would find and try and eat was just disgusting, like so gross. And I'm sure you guys have probably had the same experience with your pugs as well. Winston ate compost and I'm amazed that he actually made it through. And he munched away those manky donuts like they were gourmet. Like, if there's a nuclear holocaust, Winston was going to survive just on finding food alone. It was incredible. And not surprisingly, the reason why he was nicknamed Sumo was obviously because of his sumo size, his little black roundness. And so when Sumo and JJ come to live with us, one of the things that Andrew and I decided at the time was that Winston was not going to be sumo sized forever. The girls had done a great job in getting the weight off him, and then we had to basically continue on and get him down to a healthy size, because we all know that's really, really important. And so we decided that they were young enough to change their name, and we wanted names. Minnie used to eat scoria. Oh my God, Elvie, that's incredible. It's amazing what our pugs eat. So interestingly, we didn't get to direct or choose Winston's name. The story behind Winston's name, so some people would know it's Winston after Winston Churchill, but it was my paternal grandfather who had named Winston long before Winston and Charles come to live with us. And it's a wonderful story that I do want to share with you. The last time I saw my paternal grandfather was a couple of months prior to his passing, a number of years ago now, obviously. And I was down visiting him for an extra long weekend. I hadn't been home in quite a long time. And Lewis come with me. And whilst we were down there, my grandfather was a World War II veteran, and I'm a veteran myself. And so for the first time ever, my grandfather spent the entire 4 days I was down there talking about things that only veterans can talk about. And amazingly, as I mentioned last week, Lewis had a well-earned distrust of men, don't get me wrong. But amazingly, for this entire visit, he alternated between sitting at Poppy's feet and sitting on his lap. And my grandfather, who is a dog person, would just sit there as he was talking to me, allowing that dog to just sleep away. He was a huge snorer. And Pop would just stroke him. So it was just amazing. But the interesting thing about this relationship that Lewis had created with a man that he only ever met once was that Poppy would call out to him to come over and sit with him on his chair. But he didn't call him Lewis, even though he knew his name was Lewis. He called him Winston. And he said the reason why he called him Winston was because Winston Churchill had a pug, as we know. And my grandfather thought very highly of Winston Churchill. And so I sat there for days watching my Poppy put his hand out and he'd click his finger and say, "Come on, Winston." And Lewis would just get up from wherever he was and he'd happily stroll over to Pop, and Pop would give him a pat or he'd pick him up and plonk him down his lap. And he would literally just happily together sit there for hours talking or having a bit of a sleep. And it was just amazing. So that after I had that weekend had finished and I had to go home, I had to go back to work, unfortunately. I gave Pop a hug and I said to him, the next black pug that I own, I am going to call him Winston after Winston Churchill, just for you. And Pop just smiled at me and told me that it was a fine name for a pug, especially if they're as special as Lewis. And I was just so amazed, because I think Poppy knew that at some point in time that I would get another black pug, and it didn't matter, and that it should be, or he should be, called Winston. And so, of course, when Sumo and JJ come along to live with Andrew and I, it was a foregone conclusion. Sumo was going to be called Winston. And to be honest, amazingly, and you'll see in the picture, you can kind of see his jowls. As Winston lost all that excess weight, he developed these large jowls that were very reminiscent of Winston Churchill, which sort of makes me wonder if Poppy just knew that my next black pug would have a very Winston Churchill type face. So whenever Andrew and I think or talk of Winston, it is one of the things that we talk about with family and friends, about the fact that, you know, his name just suited him so well and how the origin of that name come around. The other thing that everybody who knew Winston would talk about was his fearlessness as he got older. So once he and Charles got comfortable with living with us, that part of his personality that was in addition to his robustness was his fearless nature was so incredible. And the one time where I really wish we had a video camera was the most stunning thing that he ever did, and that was jumping off the retaining wall that Andrew was building in the backyard of the house that we now live in. The wall was approximately 1 metre high, and at the time when this particular thing happened, the wall had been built, everything behind it had been filled in, but we hadn't cemented the area, so that area was still mud. And God knows, on this particular day, Andrew and I, we were standing out the back, and Winston and Charles and they were up on the high side of the wall, snuffling around and checking out things as they usually do. And what normally happens is, especially Winston would sort of come up to the wall, and he'd sort of have a bit of a look, and he'd have a look down, and then he'd sort of go, yeah, fair enough, it looks like the humans are going back inside. And so then he would literally walk along the top of this retaining wall until he got to the stairs that were at the end, and then he'd sort of hop down onto the stairs and come around and then walk to the back door, waiting for us to basically let him in like King Mutt, even though, like, give him 2 metres and there was the doggy door to let him in. But either way, this particular day, God help me, for some reason, he decided that that was the day that he was going to take a shortcut. And so he got to the edge, had a look over, and then that split second, for some reason, out of the corner of my eye, saw the decision cross his face and knew that it was already too late to catch him or scream no. But that was it. He was going. So he had such a determined look on his face when he first leapt. It was just amazing. It was like a panther when they leap and they all, everything is stretched out. And for, a couple of milliseconds, his determined look was almost evolved into this look of amazement, like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm flying. And then the final few milliseconds was that comprehension that he was going to faceplant. And oh my God, did he faceplant? It was like a puggy bus crash, face first in the mud, and we've got like really clay soil here. So as you can imagine, face planted and then did a bit of a roll, absolutely covered in mud. And Andrew and I just sort of almost stood there for like a good 3 or 4 seconds thinking, if he's not dead, he's not going to have any teeth left in his mouth because he hit the ground so hard. And then you wouldn't believe it. Like, no, actually you would believe it because you're all pug owners like me. He literally got back up on all 4 paws, shook his head and his body, and then basically walked to the backsliding door and stood there basically waiting to be let in, and covered from mud from head to toe, and then proceeded to snort and sneeze all the mud that he'd obviously shoved up his nose out onto the back glass as though nothing had happened. Like, no, I swear to God, no other pug in the world would do what Winston did that day and then just walk away completely unscathed. As I said, it's just so fearless, so amazingly fearless. It was just incredible. But I think probably the other thing is not only was he fearless, and I sometimes wonder, and Andrew does too, if there was like a screw loose, but he was also the most cunning pug I've ever known. And this next story will explain why I think that. At times, I think he'd happily just plod along and do whatever he wanted and then get up to mischief. But at our last house, which was the first time that they lived with us we had a raspberry vine in the backyard. And when we first planted it, we surrounded it with chicken wire so that we could stop them from trampling on it because we needed it to establish itself. And we didn't want it to piddle, didn't want them to piddle on it because then that would obviously, the acid in their piddle could also kill it. But once the vine had established itself and it started flowering, so for those of you that know raspberry vines, it takes 2 years for them to get to the point of fruiting. So we'd really looked after this raspberry vine. The second it started flowering, we thought, you beauty. Took away the chicken wire because we thought the boys won't go anywhere near it. And judging by the flowers that we had on at the time, we thought, wow, there is going to be like a bumper crop. It's going to be amazing. And, we watched as the green berries started to bud and we thought, my God, breakfast is just going to be amazing with all of these homegrown raspberries that we'd spent 2 years cultivating, not once considering the possibility that our little black pug had a different idea for these raspberries. So initially we thought that birds or possums were getting into the fruit. Because it's, sort of random berries started disappearing. And then sort of once we realised that it was more than just a couple, like a few had started to go missing, we thought that maybe we need to get some netting, and then we'll put the chicken wire back up just in case it was possums over birds. And then that was where it got interesting. So before we'd even had time to put the netting or the chicken wire up, we discovered where the raspberries were going. And amazingly, that it was our black pug that was doing it. It was Winston, not Charles, just Winston. So Andrew come home from work early. This particular day, I was actually away for work when we made this discovery. But Andrew, and he was luckily on the phone with me at the time, and he walked in the door, and what normally happened when we walked in the door is there would be 2 puggies greeting us at the door like we all do. And so I've just seen Rachel's comment about Agatha doing the same thing. It's just incredible what these pugs can do to us. I can't wait to hear about that story, Rachel. And so of course Andrew walked through the door and he said to me, "Oh, Charles is at the door, but there's no Winston. What's going on there? Maybe Winston's must be outside having a bit of a snuffle around." It was a really bright sunny afternoon, and Winston was a lover of sunbaking. And if you haven't guessed by now, Charles was the good boy. He would get led astray by Winston all the time. "I know, puppy, you're a good boy." And so basically Andrew sort of walked in and you walk through the door and you walk through the kitchen, and then there are big windows out the back and you can look out the backyard. So basically Andrew walked through with Charles, got to the back door, glass sliding doors, and that was when he discovered Winston. And Andrew obviously swore, so I won't repeat what he actually said, but he couldn't believe his eyes. And as he described to me on the phone what Winston was doing, even I was a bit amazed. And I thought, how can you be angry at something so smart? So what he was doing, he caught Winston methodically testing the low-hanging raspberries on the vine. And the little rat bag had figured out that if he rubbed his nose against the berry, the ripe ones would roll off his nose and straight into his mouth. Unbelievably. And of course, the non-ripe ones would stay. And so then he would just move on to the next one. And he'd give it a bit of a sniff, give it a bit of a nudge with his nose. And then, of course, if it was ripe, it would roll off the vine and into his mouth. Even now, I just sort of think, the shock and amazement at the cunning and patience that he must have gone through to discover this process. We both at the same time said, "I'm going to kill him." and then the second time, and then obviously the second thought was, "Oh my God, how can you be angry at a pug that come up with this whole process?" And of course, by that point in time, he had pretty much cleaned out everything that was at pug height. So, of course, Andrew ran out and said, "What are you doing?" And Winston, true to form, turned around, looked at him, gave him the "Hey, Dad," like, I haven't been caught or anything, but, "Hey, Dad, how are you doing?" And then basically trotted over to a sunny patch of grass for that post-stolen raspberry snooze. Another moment that we would have loved to have captured on video camera, but obviously we didn't have a video camera in those days. Phones still didn't quite have that video camera capability. So unbelievable, just unbelievable what this pug got up to. And as you can imagine, those 2 stories are just two events of the things that Winston got up to in the 9 years that we had him with us before he passed away at the start of last year. Just amazing, the little bugger. And we do miss him. We do miss those antics, as I'm sure you guys would miss your past pugs' antics, and probably are sitting there smiling, thinking about the antics of your current pugs. And what they do, as we Kim's already shared about the fact that her black pug, it's a Winston thing. They're just naughty, I'm sure of it. The full-on personality, and Paula, who's Mazzy girl, is a black pug, but she's a girl, so maybe she's a little bit better behaved. She's a little cutie. And yes, her name does suit her so much. Harold I never got to meet, but I do love seeing photos of him. So I can imagine, and Harold is such a such a gentleman's name. I do like that one as well. And Agatha, as I said, I cannot wait to find out about what she did with your orchid. I can only imagine. Even though I'm guessing Agatha thought that she looked very pretty with that flower on her, I'm guessing. So, but Rachel, definitely let me know. I am intrigued to know. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us tonight and was happy to listen to my stories about Winston, my second black pug, the fur brother, sibling litter brother to Charles. Definitely please share more of your stories about your pug's fearless or cunning adventures or anything else. Believe me, I am certain that you've got at least one story where you stood there with your mouth wide open, wondering how it is that they managed to do it or how they managed to survive it without a scratch. I'm just, as I said, to this day, I don't know how Winston didn't knock out every tooth in his mouth. Sorry, every tooth in his mouth when he face planted. It was just amazing. So thank you so much to everyone who joined me tonight. And the best part of the live stream is that I get to give away a $20 gift card to a lucky viewer. And I'm going to say thank you very much to Kim and Tonka for joining us tonight and saying hi. You were the first person to say hi, and so I will be sending you a message on Facebook to get your details so I can send the card through to you, and you can give Tonka a cute little present, which would be absolutely amazing. For everyone else, thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's been wonderful. Please join Charles, Rosie and I next week where we'll be talking about my little cranky old man who's Charles and where we got his name from. It's been wonderful to talk to you and I've next week we do have a big announcement about living the Pug Life. And so please tell your friends, please leave a review, please leave comments. I love talking to people about their pugs. And I'd love to see as many people as possible on our Sunday night chats. So until next Sunday, have a awesome week. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll catch you all again soon. Bye. Say bye-bye, Charles. Hey, Charles, say goodbye. Hey. Hey, say goodbye. Hey, I know, Grumble Bum.